Once upon a time, there was this amazing place. It was called America. And everywhere you looked, people were smiling and laughing. What happened to America? Land of the free and the home of the brave. The place where I was born and raised. America. Today I am traveling to the Heritage House in Marana, Arizona, to speak to some wonderful people, the history keepers, filming the wonderful and beloved mayor of Marana, Mr. Ed Honea. I hope that you come along with me.
Is that like an execution or something?
No, don't go there yet.
You're good.
That's all the information you get.
That's all it. That's right, you were in Vietnam, weren't you?
No, I was in Vietnam.
Yes, sir. Yeah, thanks for your service in that, and we very much appreciate everything that you did there.
We just had a Run for the Wall event in Marana yesterday, and we had about 250 motorcyclists. And they're all young people between like 65 and 85, right?
Okay. Nice.
And then you actually grew up here and spent most of your life here, right?
I spent all my life here.
Oh, okay.
Except for I was in 2 foreign countries, California and Vietnam. And
California.
Marana is really the fastest growing community in southern Arizona. We're about 61,000 people. It's not only housing, but it's business. I was born in St. Mary's Hospital in 1947 when it was the only hospital in Tucson. Grew up as a small child in Marana. It was a very, very small town at that time. Farmers, ranchers. By the time I started the school in 1953, and I'll tell you, when I started the school, everybody in the school looked like me. And I'm not talking about they weren't better looking or boys or girls or whatever. And that was in 1953. In 1954, we were every shade of the rainbow. And one thing I'm very proud of in Marana is the fact that in the 60s or even early 70s, they were having race riots and they were desegregating schools and everything. To be honest with you, I don't ever remember our schools here not being desegregated. And all youngsters of any color or creed went to the same school. And that's something I'm really proud of. And that is carried on till today. You go through our neighborhoods, whether it's Gladden Farms or the old Honea Heights neighborhood or some of the older places, you'll find black families, white families, Hispanic, Native American, Asian, all living together in the same community. And our thing here is we don't care what political party you belong to, how much money you have, even really what your religious faith is. We just want you to be a good neighbor and you know, help keep our community safe. And we've done really well. You know, if I go back in the early days, you know, all the roads out here were dirt. If you wanted to get from place to place, you either walked or rode a bicycle. And I can tell you many, many times as a child, if we were trying to walk over toward the freeway, which was Highway 84, it's before I-10, because there was a gas station where you could get a soda, people would drive by, and it didn't matter who they were. If there were 4 or 5 of us walking, they'd say, "Would you like a ride?" And we'd just jump in the back of the pickup and ride over to the store, and they'd let us out. Nobody worried about that. And like I said, it was a very free society to where everybody got along really well. We didn't have a lot of crime. Everybody treated everybody well. And I can remember as a child, going all over the country. We would literally go 3 or 4 or 5 miles from the house. There are many times from this very house we're in here now where my cousins, the Hintons, lived. My cousin and I would take off and walk all the way up to Rito, where a couple of the kids that, we'd like to play baseball or basketball or something lived. And we just wandered around all day. You didn't have cell phones. And, your parents didn't have to worry about you because it was so safe here and everybody was so respectful of each other. Other things that happened as a child. My granddad had a farm over on Sanders and the river there, and that farm is still there. It's now a cattle ranch, but he would grow watermelons. But he didn't have time to set out by the edge of Sanders Road, which was dirt at the time, and sell the melons. So he put a jar there and a scale, and he put watermelons 2 cents a pound, cantaloupes 3 cents a pound. And people would come along, they'd weigh them, put their change or dollar or whatever in the jar and just go about their business. And I can remember being there one day, and I remember this, and I was probably 6 or 7 years old. This is a long time ago. A lady of color was driving by, and she stopped, and she said, "Is Mr. Honea there?" Speaking of my grandfather, not me. I'm a little 7 or 8 year old kid. And I said, "No, ma'am, he's not here right now." She said, "Well, I came by a couple of days ago, and I got a watermelon and a cantaloupe, but I didn't have any money, and Mr. Honea had told me if I ever did, just come back whenever you had the money to pay it, and I owe him 45 cents, so I'm gonna put it in a jar here." And the lady just put the money in the jar and drove away, and I thought, people were honest back then, and people worked together back then. It was really a tremendous place to live. And I still remember that lady doing that. She didn't have to. Nobody saw her take the melon or the cantaloupe, but because my grandfather had trust in the people, they would always come back and pay, always. So.
Where did your grandfather come from? Was he born and raised here too?
No, my grandfather was born in Blevins, Arkansas. 3 of my 4 grandparents came from Arkansas and 1 from Oklahoma. They came to Arizona, I think in about the early 20s. My dad was born in Tempe, and my mother was born in Tucson. So, that's kind of unusual to go back 4 or 5 generations, everybody born in Arizona. And when my granddad first came here, there was a dairy on Miracle Mile in Tucson, and it was owned by a guy named Freeman Woods, who was a pretty wealthy, well-known gentleman back then. And my granddad worked at the dairy, but then in his spare time and weekends, he would come out to Marana and work on growing cotton or growing whatever he was trying to do on the land that he had purchased out here.
So what year do you think that was, in the 1920s or the?
I would say in the early 30s when he actually started doing some farming. And we weren't the first family out here, the Anway families. You've seen Anway Road if you go out in the valley. They were here before us. They were here in the 20s. But really, the Honea family came probably in about the mid-30s, actually, to Marana. They built a house on the piece of land. They had leased some state land. They did a state land lease, but you could build houses on it or whatever you want to do. You get 25-year lease, and then they automatically renew it if you're farming it. And my grandparents didn't have a lot of money, so they framed up a house, poured a slab, framed up a house. At the time, it didn't have running water in it, or I think even electricity. And they framed it up out of wood. And then they took cardboard, like from cardboard boxes, and put over the wood. Then they covered it with chicken wire, and then they plastered it. And that was their first house out here. I mean, literally had a corrugated metal tin roof on it. And it was a very, very, very simple operation. But people made do with what they had. And that house was the first town hall for the town of Marana that we actually owned, because the town bought that property from my aunt and uncle, who had gotten it from my grandfather. And that old building was our first town hall.
Where is that located?
At Sanders and Moore.
Oh.
There's still a house there, a block house back in the back, and they built that years later. And I know a couple of my uncles, when they got married as young men, lived in there, you know, for a couple of years and stuff. That building's still there. The other building got so bad, like I told you, it was cardboard, chicken wire, and plaster. But that was our original town hall. We've had some interesting visitors there. Charles Keating, remember the Keating 5 years ago? With some of the senators were involved with him and everything else. When we were looking at annexing Continental Ranch, Keating and a couple of his, I called them Philadelphia lawyers, came to the town of Marana to ask us to annex Continental Ranch. And we needed to have an executive session. We made Charles Keating and his Philadelphia lawyers go outside, set on a power pole that had been laid down as a stop for parking for like an hour while we had an executive session in that old building, because we didn't have built another room to put them in. Mm-hmm. And so you got these East Coast millionaires sitting on a painted power pole in the parking lot so we could have an executive session. So I think a lot of people find that really interesting.
You know, so it must be very unusual for you to because everything is completely built up now. So, I mean, when you were a child, this was open land and your family's land. Must be amazing.
Well, this was my aunt and uncle's land. Now, not all the land in Marana, obviously, yeah, just a small piece of it. But there were many farming families out here. But in the early days, I was kind of against growth, and I was against 2- and 3-story buildings and stuff. But what happened is I figured out that you're not going to stop growth. You've got flat ground out here, you've got water out here, people like the area out here in Marana and the Abra Valley, is welcome growth, but do it correctly. Big parks, wide roads, enough police officers to take care of everything. So Marana is one of the safest communities in Arizona. I think we were voted last year the second most safe community, over 50,000 in the entire state. But that's from our roots. We got that. We want people to feel safe. We want them to have parks to go and recreate in. And we just want a society that's very comfortable. And I think we have accomplished that.
One thing I noticed is the police, those type of people, they always seem, they just look really good. I mean, like our town hall and the city, all of the buildings and all the medical buildings. Right. I think done a really good job at creating or helping create that.
What is policing here is kind of unique. First of all, people in Marana, including the elected officials and me, love our police officers. We're not defunding them. We're trying to keep them safe. All of our cars have computers in them. We try to keep our equipment in good shape, and the equipment the officers use in good shape. And we just built a new police headquarters about 6 years ago. And we try to really take good care of them. I saw a report from the police department about a year ago, and they said we're doing twice as many stops as we were 2 years ago and writing a third as many tickets. So our philosophy with policing is we don't want to make money on stopping you for a fine. We will stop you and tell you your light was out, or you're going 10 miles over the speed limit. And a lot of times it's young men and women going to work or dropping their kids off at school or whatever. And we only write citations if it's really egregious. I mean, it has to be something really serious. If you go 25 through a school zone, you will get a ticket. But the whole idea is, if people respect the police officer, Mrs. Smith, Mr. Garcia, you're going a little bit fast here, and explain to them and talk to them in a courteous manner, they're more apt to slow down the next time they come through there because they were treated properly. If you make a statement about a police officer in Marana, the people will throw rocks at you, not the police officer, because they truly love our police personnel. And they have earned that trust and respect too.
I agree with you. And there's good police dogs too. You have, I know the canine department is.
We have, I think, 3 canine officers. And when we built our new police headquarters, that was one of the reasons, among many, that we built that new headquarters, is officers had to leave their dogs in the car if they came into the office. Now, they left the car running and the air conditioner on and all that kind of stuff. But, we needed a place that you could bring that canine officer in, put them in a kennel, they could get a drink of water, lay down in the shade in the kennel. That's directly in the building. And so we built that kind of stuff. I can even tell you how we built that police station.
Okay.
We went out and talked to the people. I went out, Terry Roseman at the time was police chief. He's now our manager, but he went out and talked to people, and we said, we need a new police station. Our town's growing too fast. We need places to store evidence. Some has to be frozen, some has to be cold, some has to be out of the light, some place to put our police dogs, a place to put our office personnel. And we need to build a new police station, but we think it's going to cost about $20 million. Well, you know what? We did a 1/2-cent sales tax, and we told everybody we thought we could have it paid off in 4 years. As it turned out, we raised enough money in 3.5 years to pay for it. We dropped the sales tax, like we told the people we were honest with them. And that new police station was $20 million, and we had some RICO funds in there as well as sales tax. It's paid for. So we're not making payments on it for the next 20 years. The taxpayers are not doing that. And the people in our community didn't have any problem with that because they respect our police officers. And most of those young men and women live in these neighborhoods. There are several in this neighborhood right here, raising their children here, and they work here. But that's something I'm proud of. We went to the people, told them we wanted to do a 1/2-cent sales tax. They said, okay. We did it. We told them it'd be 4 years or less. It was 3.5, and we dropped the sales tax, and the police station was paid for. So that's something I'm proud of in our community.
That's actually wonderful. It really is. I mean, that's probably, you know, you'd be a great example for everyone's town.
We want to be the place where people want to live. Either they want to live here, and it's not just the town of Marana, but maybe because they have really good schools in the Marana school system. Or we have great fire protection through Northwest Fire that has a main office and a station right down by the town hall. You know, or we have health with the Marana Health Center. We have a food bank here if people are in need of help, you know, in a tough time. This is a comfortable, safe place to live. Doesn't matter, like I said, what color or ethnicity you are. It doesn't matter which neighborhood you live in. I think people are really comfortable here. And people always say, well, sum it up in one word. I said it's our personality. And I'm talking about the community, not just an individual. Our personality is loving, respectful community that we take care of our own. And another thing we don't do here is we don't necessarily compete with other agencies. If the health center can do something better than the town of Marana can do, we'll help them. If the fire district can do something better than the town is doing with, you know, on things, we'll help them. In fact, we work so well with the fire district. What we did, we would approve a building, and then the fire district would come in doing the final check and wouldn't approve it. We thought, hey, let's work together. So we got the fire chief and our building officials together. They worked on it for about 3 months. Now the town of Marana's fire code and Northwest Fire's fire code are exactly the same. Well, it saves time, it saves money, it saves arguments and everything else. So if you build a structure in Marana and the town of Marana approves it, I can guarantee you Northwest, as far as fire code and safety, Northwest Fire will as well, because we got together and wrote a common code. You don't see that in a lot of communities. You just really don't. Nobody here cares who gets the credit. We have deals with Marana schools. Coyote Trail School in Continental Ranch is a prime example. There's a small park there. It's along the Riverwalk, along the Santa Cruz Riverwalk. And there's a restroom there, men's and women's restroom, and a small park. Well, we share that property with the school. During the school year, the school uses the park. It's an elementary school, and the restrooms for the kids. On the weekends and in the summer, the town of Marana uses the restrooms in the park, because you got people out recreating or walking down the walking trail or wanting to go throw a football around. So we actually share the property. They need it during the school year for 9 months. We need it more in the summer. We have restrooms along the walking trail. So instead of the school spending money on it and the town spending money on it, we share the resource. So it saves the taxpayer money. We're very proud of working together with entities within the community.
That's really amazing. And I think you're right. I don't think a lot of people, you don't hear about that. You hear a lot of bickering. Can you talk about the different areas like Avra Valley compared to Marana?
I grew up in the Honea Heights neighborhood, which is at Sanders and Moore, between Moore and the river off of Sanders Road there. It's about a couple hundred acres. And like I said, my grandparents were cotton farmers, and a couple of my uncles were, and my dad did a little bit when he was younger as well. My dad decided he didn't want to be a farmer. He wanted to subdivide his land. So along with my maternal grandfather, not my Honea grandfather, his name was Steele, they subdivided the little farm that my maternal grandfather and my parents had bought, a couple hundred acres. First neighborhood ever built in Marana. Started in about 1953. And they worked very hard to start building the neighborhood. It was very eclectic. You would have a block house. The next lot would be a mobile home. The next lot would be a frame house, because that was what people could afford in the 50s on those properties. And nobody worried about it. You might have a house and the guy next to you had a mobile. But your children played together, you went to the same church, you played on the same ball clubs, you did things together. And that was the first neighborhood. It was a very eclectic neighborhood. Some were wealthier, some were poorer, and a lot of different people. And part of that neighborhood, when I was a kid, there was a guy that lived in the neighborhood. His name was John Swanson Street that runs through Honea Heights. And he was a kind of a cement contractor on the side. Well, my dad and him and a bunch of people in the neighborhood said, we need to put a basketball court out here where our kids will have something to do in the summer. You have to realize this is a long time ago. And they all got together, pooled their money. It was on my dad's land. Poured a cement basketball court. My dad was on the Trico board at the time. He got Trico to come and set a pole and put up some lighting for free. I think they had to pay the bill, but it was $20 every month or something for the lighting on the court. And that was the first kind of community recreational center in the old neighborhood, just built by a bunch of people. I could tell you, as the community grew and we got more amenities in the community, that court didn't get a lot of use. My dad sold that lot to somebody with the existing basketball slab on there, and the person came in and built a frame house on the basketball court. And that house is still there today.
Wow.
So, I mean, here it is, 60 years later, or something like that, 70 years later. And that home is still there. But that was how we operated back then. Everybody worked together. Everybody did things together.
Well, how long have you been the mayor?
I've been on the council 36 years, but I've been the mayor for 20. The town's growing pretty quickly, but we try to maintain that demeanor. We want to act just like when I was a kid. If you drove somebody on one of the roads, you waved at them. Half the time you knew them. And even if you didn't, you waved at them. And kind of that atmosphere. Speak to everybody, make it a fun place that you live here because you want to live here, not because you have to live here.
Yeah. Reminds me a lot of Mayberry. When I go to the community Christian church a lot, but I remember that from the past. And then when I'd come here, I'd always think of it like I was going back into Mayberry.
Well, no, I mean, we're very modern.
Yeah.
And very technological. We have Roush Medical System up here off of Tangerine. I mean, we have some very high-tech stuff here. Sergeant Controls, FL Smith-Krebs. But we want to, I've used that terminology before. We're very modern. Our streets are modern, our parks are modern, our policing is modern, our water and wastewater systems are modern. But we want to maintain that personality, I told you, up the Mayberry personality, to where just everybody is friends with the other person.
I think you achieved that.
I think we are doing a pretty good job at it, and that's why a lot of people want to move here.
I wish life was like an old-time movie, and love was like it was in black and white. It was easier to tell a bad guy from a shining knight. In those old movies, everything always turned out right. And I'd be crazy to think you could be like Andy, sweep me off my feet like Fred or G, sing to me and steal my heart the way that only Frankie could. No, I'd rather ride into the sunset with the boys of Hollywood. So I'll be gone with the wind, going where there's pain in my mind, gone with the wind, just like sky.